Hi, everyone. Bill Sheridan with the Maryland Association of CPAs and the Business Learning Institute. By now, we've all heard about and probably used, in fact, the tools of the sharing economy. Services like Airbnb and Uber have disrupted and transformed their markets and left their more traditional competitors scrambling in the process. The sharing economy, though, isn't just for finding a roommate or a ride. It has direct and potentially game changing implications for professional service providers like CPAs as well. Rachel Botsman is a global expert on the power of collaboration and sharing. She is the author of the critically acclaimed book, What's Mine is Yours: How Collaborative Consumption is Changing the Way We Live. And she was named by Fast Company as one of the most creative people in business. She gave the keynote address at the Always Awesome Digital Now conference in Orlando, and I spoke with her after her address about why CPA should care and care deeply about collaborative consumption. Here's what she had to say.
The collaborative economy is about taking underutilized assets. Those assets can be skills, they can be spaces, they can be utilities, they can be stuff, and putting it into networks and marketplaces that change the way people access goods and services. eBay is kind of the godfather of these ideas, where suddenly you had a marketplace that you could match someone with a need with someone with a have. And we started to see how the dynamics of supply and demand would change. And as I talked about today, eBay was really the first marketplace that showed how had the efficiency to match a producer with a consumer, but there was also the trust to bypass many traditional retail channels. And then kind of around 2008, 2009, we started to see the likes of Airbnb and Uber and Lending Club applying these principles. But it really started to tip in 2011, 2012. And a lot of that is to do with actually smartphone adoption. So the social, mobile, and location-based technologies take out so much of the friction in these marketplaces and networks. Yeah, and I should say actually the equivalent of Up Council for financial is vouched for. So there is exactly the same equivalent. Up Council is essentially a marketplace or a platform for lawyers to offer their services directly to clients. The interesting thing about Up Council is the quality of attorneys on the platform. So these aren't just new graduates, they are people who've gone to top law schools, they've been in firms for 7-8 years, and sort of had the realization that it's either not the type of work they want to do, they're not in control of the work, they don't like the hours, they don't like being a part of firm culture, but what stops them leaving and going independently is they realize they're also dependent on the firm. They're dependent on the firm for the supply of clients, they're dependent on the firm for secretarial support, payments, all that thing. And so Up Council is not just a marketplace that gives people who need legal services a place to advertise for that. It's an entire suite of services that supply the support function of a firm as well. And I think what's interesting is it's still early days, but you're starting to see a community of independent lawyers form on Up Council. The flip side of that, I think, is the clients. As I said, when I was researching them, I thought it would be startups. I thought it would be small businesses that couldn't afford the big firms. But that's not their fastest growing base. Their fastest growing base is big corporations that can either find exactly the professional they need and see this whole history of reputation in terms of what other people have thought of them, or they can actually expand their in-house teams based on very clear visibility into the talent that's on offer. I always think it's a forced conversation to have between those two camps, because the fact is it's happening. And it's a bit like, when society got organized institutions, and we started to implement institutional regulation to make these industries safer. The flip side is now happening, where it's becoming more and more decentralized. And I think the interesting thing also is that the assumption is that these marketplaces are low quality. They're not. They are high quality providers of goods and services. So I think for many traditional organizations, they sort of have to ask themselves a tough question, which is, what is the unique value that we can deliver or offer to clients that is impossible to replicate in a marketplace and a network model? It can't be, well, we've operated this way and many people like engaging with firms and they like coming into offices and they trust the partners, because all of that can be blown up pretty fast. If I was running a practice, I would start to say, is there part of my practice I could actually put into a marketplace model? So could I actually think of downtime in our firm or excess capacity of people's time and experiment selling that to clients in a marketplace fashion? So I think that's one thing. The second thing is I would actually start to engage and work on these platforms purely for the experience. So how does it feel to find clients? How does the relationship feel? And what is different about that relationship that is missing from my own practice? All the way through from the discovery process to how briefs are written, to the interaction, to payment, to follow through. Because even if your intention is not to move into a marketplace model, there's probably something in that user experience that you want to implement in your practice. So, I just think in my own life, I was talking to a lawyer the other day, and I was saying to him, you're so in trouble because I'm using Up Counsel for this other issue I have, and then I've got this big firm, and you send me these bills that are in 6-minute units. I have no idea what you're doing. When I need you, I can't get hold of you. There's no way of me giving feedback to your firm that you're actually pretty mediocre and I want to fire you. And these days are over. Like, this lack of transparency that you have depended on, this power that you have over clients, this is over. Because I am now experiencing total transparency and interaction, the ability to find my lawyer and he's engaged on this different platform, and then over here I'm paying 4 times the amount of money for an inferior service. I think there's so much talk of change that I get why it's easy to say this isn't going to happen on my watch, or I don't really care, or that's a subset of people. What is different is the compressed cycle around change. So I think Uber is a really good example. The number of people 3 years ago who said, I will never get in an Uber car, and they started using Uber Black and then Uber Taxi, and now they use UberX because they've discovered it's actually a better service, or it's a service on par and they can pay 3 times as less. So behavioral change is happening in an accelerated fashion. So, if you want to run your practice in a traditional way, that's fine. But I think more and more people are going to hit against losing clients because the experience they're having in another area of their life is so disconnected from the type of financial advice that they're getting. I think, it's a big question to answer. I think there's, certain sectors where we'll see, like, insurance, mortgages, they, I would say, will be top of the list in terms of financial services, where you'll start to see collaborative models think about risk and shared ownership structures and all that. So I think that's going to be really interesting. There will be, I think, the Uber of that space start to crop up. I think the biggest impact is going to be on sort of reputation profile. So like the next generation of LinkedIn. Whereas if you think about all these social networks, they're great in terms of connecting and matching people, but the real value is all the knowledge you have in your head about colleague X and all the knowledge in client Y's head about provider Y. And what social networks have not done a great job of is displaying what you know about people you know in ways that allow people to make more informed decisions. And that, I think, is, what's really going to come to the surface is this visibility of information that is going to be frightening to many people, because there's no hiding. It's going to be these systems of accountability. And I mentioned it today, it sounds so basic, but the fact that drivers rate passengers, that passengers don't rate drivers anymore, is a signal, an early sort of noise in this just world of transparency that we just can't even begin to fathom.
We're an association of CPAs. What would you advise us, if you were us, what would be your first step in playing around with this? Where would you think about going?
I guess the first thing is a sense of member pulse. So if members were to go independent, what is it that they would want from an association that they think would suddenly disappear from their lives? So
right, if we weren't around, what would they need?
What would they need? And then again, I would immerse myself in the experience, not on just some of the financial stuff, but these platforms of linked professionals, and really look at it. What are they offering users that makes them? It's not even addictive. It's like people say, I cannot imagine what I did before Up Council came along.
Right.
So it's starting to understand how you become indispensable again is what I would do. And so what it is in not just the tools and the functions, but in the experience of these platforms, that they become a part of people's identity.
Right.
So they don't say I'm a freelance lawyer, they say I'm part of Up Council. And that is a really important distinction, that suddenly Up Council is a brand that they wear,
right,
versus just a place for them to offer goods and services.
Now, in the other case, and you probably see this even with your dad to a degree, but in our profession, you've got that older generation that have kind of got to where they've got to. And then this younger generation who is much more tuned into what you're talking about. And so our challenge is, we know that, but we have to straddle those two worlds. Yeah,
but the thing is, I say this to I see this with my father's generation, they're retired, they're starting to hit retirement, they're 65. My dad's actually, he doesn't do accounting anymore, he's a script writer, whatever. But they have tons of spare capacity, right?
Sure.
So I think this way of thinking has massive application to a retiring workforce that still says, I have 10 to 15 years. I don't want to work like I was working.
Right.
But you know what? I do 10 hours a week.
Right.
And that could be really interesting. Like if the CPA Association, it didn't focus on the younger generation.
How could we build an exchange for them?
Yeah. So think of all the experience and latent capacity in, say, 65 to 75. If you could create a marketplace for that demographic to suddenly offer those skills,
services,
it's so, you learn so much from that experience, and it's almost a public service in a way, because I think
you could match that to startups and entrepreneur veterans, returning veterans who are trying to get into the business world. It's like, how do you find? But you have to find the right. What we need to do, find a couple high school kids who can code and get them in the basement.
That's the easy part. There's a platform called Near Me. You could start it tomorrow. They're white label marketplaces that you then build your platform on top of.
Really?
Yeah. So you don't have to create a marketplace. You just have to create critical mass of supply and demand. So you've got the supply, right? You've got all these accountants,
Right,
and then just go out there and create.
And we have a
demand.
lot of relationships with the other organizations, nonprofits, and all the business community that could use it. So the platform's called Near Me. Is that it?
You could build it on top, and it's this type of thinking works perfectly when there is some kind of break between supply and demand, and,
Right.
and there is supply and there is demand. They just sit in different places,
Right.
and marketplaces bring them together.